Hello, all you good people. I hope everyone's doing well. As usual, I'll start out by thanking all of you who posted questions and made this video possible. So now let's get started with the first question. Since the so-called Lucchese family is a name given by the law and media, what do the street guys call it? To start with, that's totally incorrect. And it was not the law or the media who came up with the name, but rather the family received the name from Tommy Lucchese, the former boss of the family, a name used by street guys and members of their life as well. Why do the Genovese and Gambino families individually appear to have more members than the remaining three families? Are they better organized or have more money? The numbers for membership were set in place when the families were officially created. At the time, the Genovese and Gambino families were larger in numbers and were historically always considered wealthy families. And over time, so were the Lucchese family. How do wise guys have such long memories? Take the Donnie Brasco thing. It's amazing how everyone remembers who introduced him to everyone, including multiple families. Well, typically most guys in life possess good memory retention, including myself, although lately I do find myself getting a little forgetful. The Donnie Brasco situation was a major one, so it's only natural for people to search their memories as to who first brought the guy around, and that information became public knowledge, which gets repeated and repeated throughout the years. During your time, did Joe Cafe have an acting captain, and if so, who was it? If he did, I was never introduced to that person. As far as I can remember, Joe had no acting captain. What were some of the restaurants you went to that were owned by Lucchese members? And did you ever meet Joseph Giampa? If so, what was your opinion of him? The only Lucchese-owned restaurant that I ate in was Enzo's in the Bronx, owned by a Lucchese member named John John. And I never met Joe Giampa. As far as I can remember, I may have met him at a wake, but I don't know, so I have no opinion of him. Was violence just a tool, and when you applied it, did you ever feel guilty? A somewhat loaded question, but here's the answer. Violence will always be a tool used by the mob, not to the extent it was years ago. And as far as feelings of guilt, anytime anyone becomes violent with someone, guilt should come into play. Do mobsters sell off their loans the way banks and mortgage companies do? Also, will late payments cause an increase in interest rates? I've heard of loans being shifted from one guy to another. I personally never did it. Sometimes one guy will take a loan over to do someone a favor. The VIG or interest is typically set and is what it is. But of course, late payments can double up. One time a guy owed me about $3,000 in late VIG payments. Do all five families have ties to the Sicilian Mafia? I would say most probably in some form or another. Certain families have closer ties than others. And in my opinion, the Gambinos have the strongest ties out of all the families. Does the Brooklyn faction still have a strong presence in the construction industry? And if you had become an acting captain for Dom Trusello, would you have done better financially with your legitimate employment in construction? I'm not really sure what the Brooklyn faction is doing as far as construction, but most crews are involved with the construction industry in one form or another. I don't believe as an acting captain for Dom would have helped me in any way. My area in construction was safety, and it wasn't much Dom could help me with. Can an associate have enough power to have their own crew? If the answer is yes, here's a hypothetical question. An associate has his own crew and for some reason goes rogue in an attempt to gain more power. If his crew realizes this, can they take action to stop him? It's important to remember, every associate's power, as you put it, comes from the guy he's with and the crew he's around. If an associate tries to step out on his own, he'll most definitely have the brakes put to him. Which Lucchese member threw the best barbecue, which you attended? I've only been to two. One thrown by Joe Cafe, and the other was Spanky. Joe Cafe's was more elegant, and his yard, you feel like you're in a resort. He even has palm trees. At Joe's barbecue, he had servers, etc. He also has a beautiful bar and an old-style 1950s diner in his basement. Nothing in comparison to the barbecue Spanky had, which was a 4th of July party. Did you or anyone you knew ever meet or had any dealings with the New England Patriarca family? I definitely didn't, and I'm not sure about anyone else. You mentioned the Lucchese Social Club on Connington Avenue in the Bronx. You also mentioned another Bronx Lucchese Social Club. Can you say where it's located and which crew ran it? I don't know where it is. The same guy who owns Enzo's, John John, owned that club. Here's a hypothetical. A guy gets buried betting sports. He instructs his betting agent not to let him play because he can't pay. But the agent keeps taking his bets, which buries him again. If it goes to a sit down, do you think the player will be let out of the debt because he said not to take his bets? Let me just say, I don't know who would sit down over this. It's cut and dry. I don't care what his instructions were. He still placed the bets. And at a sit down, if there ever was one, I know what I would say. So he placed the bets, and if he won, should we not pay him because he told us not to take his action? Give me a break. Do you think Louis Dedon has any chance of getting out of jail? I think not only Louis, but everyone's going to take a shot. There's been some guys who people thought would never get out that are now on the street. So I think Louis will eventually have a chance, and in all honesty, I hope he does get out. Is John McCallie a Gambino member? John's the son-in-law of Louis Dedon, and yes, he's a member of the Gambino family. What was so important about the list that the Italian police were looking for at Matteo Messina Denero's villa when he was found? What does the list represent for Cosa Nostra? I'm not sure what list you're referring to. One of the most sought-after items that Italian law enforcement went searching for was documents. Documents that went from Tortorina to Bernardo Provenzano and allegedly were passed on to Matteo Messina Denaro, which had to do with the collusion between the Mafia and the Italian state, documents that were never found. Here's a question that was sent to me outside of YouTube. Do you think the Lucchese captain Peter Chiodo was wrongfully labeled as an informant? If so, why? The short answer is yes. Pete Chiodo was loyal and began to run afoul with Vic and Gas for several reasons, one being botching and delaying hits and receiving bail and ultimately pleading guilty on the window case without seeking permission first. The Lucchese's paranoia was in full swing at the time, and in typical Lucchese fashion, they falsely labeled Chiodo and attempted to have him killed. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a like, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. And for anyone who'd like to show appreciation for videos like this, or to help me continue making them, you can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly remind everyone of my blog, also called Sit Down News, especially those of you who still enjoy reading. It can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. And for the final question, you mentioned in a previous video that you would have moved to any of the Lucchese crews to get out of Big John's crew, with the exception of any of the Bronx crews. Was there any particular reason, and would you say the Bronx captains would have been worse to deal with despite John's faults? Yes, it's true. I wanted to get away from Big John in the worst way. The reason I said with the exception of the Bronx crews is because it's commonly known that there's always been animosity between the Bronx and Brooklyn guys. So to be a Brooklyn guy placed in a Bronx crew is essentially being in the belly of the beast. As far as Big John goes, a person would have to deal with him on a personal level to understand just what an asshole he really was.